Surrender and I'll be gentle.
Order guide you. Stabilize. I will have order.
Zhongli is insanely powerful. Since they buffed him, he has just been off the charts insane. My favorite part about his kit is that you can build him as a support with minimal investment and you can get damage just like this. If you want to be hitting insanely high damage Qs, then follow this build guide and your Zhongli will be an insane burst DPS or support. In this video, we're going to go ahead and talk about all of his support sets and burst DPS sets, as well as what the best weapons for him are, what stats to choose, and some general tips at the end of the video. So without taking up too much time, let's hop right into the builds. To build your Zhongli as a burst DPS or support, you have a couple options for artifacts. First and foremost, the 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith set is the best support set for him overall and the rest of your team. The Tenacity set gives a 20% HP bonus to Zhongli, which is really good for him because his Ascension 2 makes it so that all of his damage is increased by a fraction of his HP. Not to mention his shield actually scales off of HP as well, so you're actually getting a 2-for-1 deal there. All of your damage and all of your shield is getting increased with the Millilith set. Because shield is becoming more increasingly important as we see new content added to Genshin Impact, having an incredibly powerful shield can be an awesome tool for making sure that you're able to clear everything. So in my opinion, the 4-piece Tenacity set is going to be the best in slot for him as a support. However, many of the other sets can count as support as well, but you will be doing more burst damage with these next sets we're going to talk about, so that's why they qualify as burst DPS. So the next set that we're going to briefly discuss is the 2 Noblesse and 2 Petra set. This is currently the most popular set, but it's only really most popular because it was the first set that people built with Zhongli, since this is a rerun banner and he has been out before this. The reason this is the best burst DPS build for him is because it selfishly buffs, which means that all of the extra effects of the set are going straight to Zhongli, and it's not like a weak effect going to the rest of your party. With this set combination, you're getting 20% more damage to your ult, and then following that, you're going to be getting 15% more Geo damage, so that Geo damage is going to buff both your pillar and your Q, and Noblesse is just going to buff your Q. The reason this is stronger than Tenacity is mostly just because it's a flat additive bonus, so essentially whatever damage you would be doing without the set, you're just going to add 35% more damage to that total, and then you're going to be doing 35% more damage than you initially would have. Tenacity doesn't have any flat multipliers like that, which is why it is more focused on support, especially because it raises your HP. But the trade-off for not using Tenacity is that your shield is going to be about 3 or 4 hits weaker depending on the content that you're doing. So if you have to choose between Noblesse Petra or Tenacity, here are the pros and cons of both. Basically, it comes down to what you're building him for and what you would rather use him for in your team, whether that's shield or damage. But if we're choosing a better overall set to use, I think Tenacity of the Millilith is the better set, and it's not just because I made a video on it, it's because the numbers actually support that. I had my math person run a simulation for damage using a level 90 Zhongli with a level 10 Q talent with the exact same stats and weapons. There were no substats on any of the artifacts. In the damage simulation, on non-crit, Noblesse Petra only did about 1k more damage than Tenacity, and on crit it only did about 3k more than Tenacity. So by switching over to Tenacity, you're losing about 3,000 damage on crit if you're using this exact build. However, you're going to be gaining about 3 to 5k in shield strength as a result of the bonus in HP. I think the damage loss is minimal going from Noblesse Petra to Tenacity, and I really think that the shield is more worth it. And that's without mentioning that you get a Noblesse level attack buff 20% for your entire team, as long as Zhongli's pillar is hitting enemies. So in conclusion, in my opinion, Tenacity is the best for overall utility. I would farm that set. There's a couple other sets you can run too, but they're less optimal. 2 Noblesse and 2 Tenacity is fine, 2 Petra and 2 Tenacity is fine, and 4 Noblesse is fine, but I ultimately would just use those to hold you over while you're farming the other sets. Whether that ends up being Noblesse Petra or just Tenacity, I wouldn't plan on using these other 3 sets I listed long term. I'm sure by now you're wondering about the stats, so that's what we'll talk about next. The big debate is between HP and attack. Stats for Zhongli look complicated, but in actuality they're pretty simple. If you're building a shield bot and willing to sacrifice meteor damage, you're going to run HP, 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 since your shield scales off of HP. All HP is exactly what you want if you want to have as much uptime on your shield as possible. If you're building support Zhongli though, I recommend HP or attack for the sands, and geo damage, and then crit rate or damage as necessary. I say this in almost every guide, but in case you're new around here, the ratio is 1 to 2, and the minimum is 40 to 80. So if you can get 40 crit rate and 80 crit damage at a bare minimum, build crit. If you cannot achieve those numbers, you're better off going into HP or attack with this build. Crit's honestly just too valuable of a stat to give up, so I would just build into crit if you're able to meet those standards. If you're building burst DPS Zhongli, but you don't care about the shield, you're going to build attack or HP, geo damage, and crit. Again, you do need to worry about the ratio of 40-80, but in a worst case scenario, you can go ahead and pick HP or attack if you have to. I just think he suffers as a burst DPS a lot if you aren't able to build crit on him. Now, I know I kept saying attack or HP, so we're going to talk about when to choose what. Basically, to decide between attack or HP, you can reference this graph showcasing the effectiveness of HP versus attack. If your weapon has more than 450 base attack, building attack sands is going to be stronger than building HP sands, since Zhongli's overall base attack will be higher. However, if you have less than 450 base attack, you are actually going to get more damage by building HP. For a burst DPS build, this is super good to know, so that way you can maximize your damage output, but personally, I prefer HP sands anyways because it helps your shield strength by a ton. As for substats, this is one of the only characters where HP as a substat is desirable. Crit is king, but if you're going for a shield bot or something, HP is always good. Don't be discouraged if you get a bunch of HP rolls, they really help Zhongli. Now that you know what artifacts you're building, let's move on to weapons. If you're building shield bot Zhongli, then technically Black Tassel is going to be your best in slot because its main stat is HP. If you're shield botting, you likely don't care about damage that much and you just want to make sure that none of your actual carries can take any damage, so that's where that would be best in slot. However, if you don't want to invest into Black Tassel, you can always just go ahead and follow the support and burst DPS weapon priority, which we'll talk about right now. For support and burst DPS Zhongli, they both use the same weapon priority. Zhongli's best in slot is Staff of Homa for its crit damage stat and its HP stacking, as well as its passive. Following Staff of Homa though, Jadewing's Spear allows you to build crit and has a strong passive and high base attack, so that is your second best choice. And following Jadewing's Spear, Deathmatch allows you to build crit and is only better than Vortex Vanquisher when Vortex has no stacks. However, that makes it more consistent in a support or burst DPS build because you're not going to have Zhongli out on the field for a long period of time, so for that reason, Deathmatch is better than Vortex Vanquisher. Same thing applies to Black Cliff Pole. It does slightly better damage than Vortex Vanquisher if Vortex isn't at max stacks. Black Cliff lets you build a crit damage main stat, which is pretty good. The only issue is that you're never going to end up using its passive at all because you're always going to be switching Zhongli off the field. So after Black Cliff comes Vortex Vanquisher with no stacks, but again, if Vortex has max stacks, it will outdamage Deathmatch and Black Cliff. Following Vortex is Skyward Spine, which has a really high base attack and increases your crit rate, and following Skyward Spine is going to come Favonius Lance. For reference, Deathmatch actually outperforms Favonius Lance by about 20%. For free to play, you should use Prototype Star Glitter or Black Tassel. The thing is, they're both pretty close in damage. I would lean towards Star Glitter if you're not running a Geo battery with him, just because it has energy recharge as its main stat, which really helps with your Q uptime. Lithic Spear viability kind of depends on the rest of the weapons that you have and how many characters from Leeway are in your party. If you can manage to get a full Leeway party, then Lithic Spear is probably as good as Deathmatch or even slightly better. Overall, Lithic Spear is actually a really good choice if you haven't built any of these others. Specifically, if you got it but don't have the battle pass, it's definitely a really good option. So hopefully that helps you pick out a weapon. By now you've probably picked out a build, which is really great. We can move on to general tips now, where I'll just cover a couple important things when you're building Zhongli and his team. The first general tip is something I covered in my Noel video about energy pocketing, where you can switch characters in and out to make sure that energy goes to a central source. Essentially, if you're running a character that ends up killing an enemy or generates elemental particles, you can switch characters into Zhongli before those particles reach your body, and it'll give him extra energy. So building off of this point, running double Geo with Zhongli is super strong, and I cannot recommend it enough. You can use a second Geo character to generate extra particles for Zhongli, and characters that would be really good at this would be characters like Ningguang, Geo Traveler, or Albedo. Generally speaking, Noelle isn't super great at particle generation, so I wouldn't recommend her with Zhongli. But aside from energy generation and Q uptime, you're going to actually get a ton of Geo Resonance uptime because his shield is so strong. For reference, Geo Resonance is the strongest resonance in the game. It increases shield strength by 15%, and characters who are protected by a shield will deal 15% more damage. That's stronger than Pyro Resonance because Pyro just increases attack by 25%, which is not an actual additive bonus, it's just an attack bonus. Geo Resonance also makes it so enemies have Geo Resistance Shred whenever they get hit by Geo ability, which essentially just makes your Zhongli Q stronger if you have your pillar up and they take ticks from the pillar. Not to mention that your pillar actually resonates off of other Geo structures, so that means if you're playing Geo Traveler and you put down a rock or something, you're going to do extra damage. Those are the general tips I have for you right now, but I will be making an ultimate play guide which will go into more tips in depth and team compositions and things like that in the future. So I hope this video ends up helping you build your Zhongli, and look forward to some more Zhongli videos in the future as time goes on. I'm going to be posting a little bit more about him because I do want to get really in depth. There will be an ultimate play guide, but for now I want to focus on these individual build guides because the ultimate play guides are getting a little bit too long. If you've enjoyed, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below for more Genshin Impact content, and make sure to like and comment on the video if you have any feedback or if you've enjoyed. All that sorts of feedback really helps me out when I'm making videos in the future. So thank you all, and I'll catch you next time.